Buddhism is a world religion founded by the Buddha in ancient India. Buddhists seek wisdom, meaning, inner peace, and freedom from greed, hatred, and ignorance. Mutually sustaining life, a Buddhist call to a troubled world.
Do not seek to know Buddha by his form or attributes, for neither the form nor the attributes are the real Buddha. The true Buddha is enlightenment itself. The true way to know Buddha is to realize enlightenment.
During the previous two shows, we looked at the life of the Buddha and related spiritual themes. In the next two shows, we will continue to look at these themes through the images of Buddha and Bodhisattvas. These images, whether of statues or pictures, are probably the single most visible artifacts of Buddhism. Most everyone, even outside of Asia, is familiar with the images of the Buddha. While such images are so common today and play such important roles in the religious lives of Buddhists, it's very interesting that the practice of representing the Buddha in human form did not begin for several hundred years after the Buddha had passed on. A number of reasons for this have been offered. One view is that the Buddha was too sacred and beyond conceptual thinking to be limited to human form. This idea is actually similar to the views held in other religions such as Judaism and Islam. But this does not mean that in the centuries immediately after the Buddha, that there were no representations or symbols for the Buddha at all. For example, we find the use of parasols and the empty throne, which symbolize the Buddha's royal background. Another popular symbol was the footprint of the Buddha. And of course, the wheel of Dharma that we see at the beginning of each of our shows, symbolizing the Dharma or the teachings which continue to spread widely and endlessly like a rolling wheel of a cart. To tell us more about the Buddha images, we have with us today a guest. Her name is Monica Dix, and Monica is presently affiliated with the Department of Asian Studies at the University of British Columbia. So, Monica, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me on your program.
Well, I'd like to ask you to begin with, what did you find appealing about the Buddha images that you've been working on for so long?
The most appealing aspect is the variety of Buddhist images we have. Like we see in the background, the Buddha is represented in various kinds of images. All of them represent various aspects of his life and his teachings. Mm-hmm. And it is especially through paintings, sculptures, engravings, and other forms of artifacts that we can understand the complex, abstract Buddhist doctrine in a more comprehensible way.
Yes, and yes, Buddhist teachings tend to be very difficult, so through the images, statues, paintings, that we're able to convey the the thoughts. And the first image we like to talk about is what is known as the baby Buddha. One hand up, one hand down. Can you tell us more about this?
Yes, this is a small bronze sculpture of the baby Buddha. He has one hand pointing up and one hand pointing down, and he's uttering the sentence, "In the heavens above and the heavens below, I alone am the uttermost one." This is the final birth. There is no further rebirth. There are various interpretations towards the sentence, but I take it to mean that every person is unique and every person has the full possibility to attain enlightenment. This particular representation of the Buddha is important to Buddhists in East Asian traditions because every year, on the occasion of the celebration of the Buddha's birthday, which is April 8th, the devotees pour sweet green tea over the sculpture, which is symbolic for the sweet rain that fell upon the Buddha's birth in Lumbini Garden.
Right, thank you. Yeah, when I see this image with his hand up, it reminds me of a humorous story. Once a man that I know at the temple that I used to serve, he came up to me and he asked, is the Buddha a football fan? I said, why do you ask that? He says, well, because he has his hands up like this, and he looks like those guys at the San Francisco 49er games with those fingers saying, "We're number one, we're number one." Well, so Monica, the second image that I like for you to talk about is the one that's called the Emaciated Buddha. Could you tell us more?
Yes, this is an image of the Emaciated Buddha, or it's also called Buddha descending from the mountain. And this image relates to the story that following the Buddha's encounter of an old person, a sick person, and a dead person, he departed from his family and he took up residence in the mountain to practice ascetic meditation. In these images, you can see the bones are protruding from underneath his body. His body is very emaciated, skinny, undernourished, and he's having a beard, which is a sign of wilderness or like the wild recluse. Images like these are particularly popular in Japanese Zen Buddhist art.
I see. The beard, that's interesting, especially since he left being a prince and having spent 6 years of austere practices. The next Buddha is one that is probably most well known particularly in Southeast Asia, and that's the one that depicts the moment of enlightenment. And we have the image here, the white Buddha. This is a Thai image, and it's called the Buddha with the earth touching gesture. Could you tell us more about that?
Yes, the story about this particular Buddhist image relates to the victory over the demon god Mara. And the Buddha makes the hand gesture or mudra of calling the earth to witness, meaning one hand is pointing down to the ground, the other hand is on his lap. Calling the earth to witness refers to the fact that he accomplished good deeds in his past life and that he accumulated merits in his current life in order to occupy the lotus throne at Bodh Gaya.
So he's calling. What I like about this particular image is the gesture of touching the earth and all of nature giving witness to his experience. And so there is that strong connection between Buddha's enlightenment or awakening with the natural world, which I personally enjoy. The next one I'd like to ask you about is the Sermon Buddha, where he's given his first sermon, and it's often called the turning the wheel of Dharma Buddha. So,
yes, according to the story, the Buddha taught his first sermon at the deer park in Sanas near Benares, and he taught it to his 5 primary disciples. And this image shows the Buddha teaching and discussing the Buddhist law in front of his 5 disciples. And it's called turning of the Dharma wheel because the Dharma wheel is symbolic of the Buddha's teachings.
Yes, and the Dharma that's always turning.
That's right.
Like a wheel of a cart. Yes.
That's right. This image shows the Buddha lying on his deathbed and surrounded by his mourners. Particularly in Japanese painting and sculpture, the mourners include not only his disciples, but all kinds of lay people, animals, and sometimes his mother, Queen Maya, is painted coming from the right corner and watching over the Buddha's death.
So the last Buddha I'd like to ask you about is the so-called Laughing Buddha. And we have an image here. And so can you tell us about this?
Yes, the Chinese Laughing Buddha, which has a happy disposition, a fat belly, and in this image he's wearing a bag, but sometimes he's also depicted being surrounded by many children, is considered a form of Maitreya. However, this attribution is rather problematic because originally this particular deity was a Chinese fertility figure and did not belong to the traditional Buddhist canon. And his Chinese name is Putai Hoshang, meaning hemp-back monk. And in China, he's seen at the street corners and temples, and people rub his belly in order to aspire for good luck and prosperity. Yes.
Will it bring me luck, do you think?
I think so.
I hope so. So here we have an example of a native Chinese god who has been incorporated into Buddhism, and which makes him look very different from some of the other images that we saw, for example, the Emaciated Buddha. Quite a contrast between the two. So, as you can see, these images are not idols to be worshipped, as they in themselves don't hold any special power. Instead, through the images, we are inspired to be like him. Even if we cannot be exactly like him, what is important is that we aspire in our own way to realize awakening. Hence, we have today's passage. Do not seek to know the Buddha by his form or attributes, for neither the form nor the attributes are the real Buddha. The true Buddha is enlightenment itself. The true way to know the Buddha is to realize enlightenment. Monica will be joining us once again next week as we continue to take a look at the images of Buddhism. Well, Monica, thank you for being with us. See you next week.
I'm looking forward to joining you again.
We at Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai pursue peace and happiness for people around the world. We have published the Buddhist teachings into 41 languages and donated our publication to hotels and other facilities in 55 countries. We would like to share the Buddhist teachings with people around the world. That's our mission. Visit our website for more information.